but I could never question his creation because I'm like, we can't do this on our own.
Hmm.
Like, we
Ugh,
could never design this and take a seed and make this, like medicine and food. But he can do it. Like,
yeah.
it's incredible. And I keep learning about the different things I can do with herbs, which is so fun because I'm like, look what you did.
Yeah.
That's awesome, God.
Welcome to The Home and the Maker, sharing advice and encouragement about all topics homemaking and homesteading, and honoring the maker in all of it. Join Megan from Shine.fm for today's conversation.
You've got the spice cabinet or a spice rack in your kitchen. Maybe you have some dried herbs in there like basil, rosemary, or thyme, but there are herbs that can also be used for medicinal purposes as well. So this is called herbalism, studying about how plants can be used for medicine. And joining me to talk about herbs and remedies today is Sam Walker, who shares all about her homesteading and herbalism experiences on her Instagram page, Grow in Grace Garden. Thanks for joining me, Sam.
Thank you for having me.
So, what started this for you? Why learn about herbs and start planting herbs in your garden?
Well, that kind of started when I first started gardening. God put something on my heart and it was like, go grow the things,
Mm,
go learn about it. And I'm a sciencey person, so I love learning like how something works and why it works that way and what we can do with it and how we change this. And so I first started gardening, over 10 years ago, and I started with like rosemary. I think was probably my first herb, rosemary or basil. And I just fell in love with growing herbs, and it was so much easier than like vegetable gardening. And I'm like, okay, I can get behind this. And then I started learning, like how to use it in cooking was a big reason I fell in love with it. And then it was teas, and then it was learning the medicinal properties. And my mom is also an herbalist, and
mm.
so that, was a big inspiration also. But yeah, God put it on my heart and I just fell in love.
That's awesome. I love that. Just start with the cooking and then it just kind of progressed for you. So, what do you primarily, like these days, what do you primarily do with the herbs that you are growing? Mostly cooking, or how much are you saving for teas and for the medicinal purposes?
I do a little bit of everything. So I will grow them and save them for cooking for sure. I love making my own seasoning blends or like herb salts. And then, so definitely cooking is a big one. I also like making my own tea blends and like gifting it for people. Like if my sister is dealing with insomnia, I'm like, okay, let me whip up a tea from my garden and see if this can help. And then, I love to make salves and things like that. So I like to use it as our first aid. So I'm going to throw out a bunch of different names. A lot of people may not know
Yes.
what it is, but like oxymels are like an herbal concentrate that back in ancient times they used for medicine. And so I love making our first aid, our medicine. And then there's things like herbal bath teas and like herbal sugar scrubs. So I use it for so many different purposes. Herbs are so versatile.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people don't realize what you can do with herbs. You can even make herb jellies. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I use it for a little bit of everything. Like I said, I love experimenting. So I'm always trying to find like another way to use the herbs that I have.
Yeah. Now, the big question, especially for someone who doesn't have that kind of experience with the herbs and remedies and things like that, and kind of being on the outside of the herb world as well, a little bit for me, I'm like, do they work? Like, how have you seen something you've created or, you know, mixed together with the herbs from your garden? How have you seen that work to help as that first aid or help as a tea to soothe something?
Absolutely. Herbs are incredible. And that's one thing is so funny story. My mom actually worked for pharmaceuticals for 30 years, over 30 years, and she retired and became an herbalist. So
Okay.
that's a lot right there. But yeah, when I was a younger mom, I used to just grab, the Tylenol, grab all those different things that the doctors told us to use. And then I started finding out how bad all of that stuff is for our body and the side effects that they don't tell you about. And with herbs, you may have some side effects, like let's say your body has kind of an allergic reaction to that species. Like you may have like, maybe breakout in hives or something like that. Or if you're pregnant, you need to be careful or
Hmm.
taking certain medicine. But I personally have not found any side effects with using herbs. And so it's so much better for your body. And one thing with herbs, you have to use them longer than you would instead of just popping a pill. You
Yeah.
have to use them longer. You have to start them early and you need to use them more regularly. So let's say elderberry syrup is something a lot of people have heard about. Elderberry syrup is really great for sickness and the flu. And you can use, something from over the counter or that is prescribed to you, and there's horrible side effects for that. But if you use elderberry syrup, you would take it more often and, for longer periods of time. And you're not dealing with any of those side effects. It's really helping you. In fact, I usually feel, like if I'm actually taking it or fire cider, things like that, I feel amazing within 3 days. Like it's
Okay.
like it knocks it out quickly. So definitely from my experience, they work. And like salves and things like that I make, I've gifted those for years for people, and they're like, this is incredible. Like if they have a burn or a rash or
Mm.
eczema, whatever it is, and they're like, this is incredible. Like I use it when it starts coming and it takes it right away. And so yeah, I absolutely think that they work. I think God knew exactly what he was doing when he gave us herbs. And so as long as we know how to use them, it's definitely a huge benefit for us.
That's awesome. What's probably the most common thing that you use in your home? So the most common herb or maybe the most common remedy that you use.
Oh, there's so many. Well, every morning, 2 years ago, I switched over from drinking coffee, and I was drinking organic, good coffee, high quality coffee. But I was still having some health issues
Mm.
due to caffeine and the high acidic, things like that. And so, I switched over to an herbal mushroom coffee. And so I've found now that like I don't suffer from allergies,
Wow.
uh, just much more healthier all around. So there's a lot of that's one thing. I just wake up every morning and I drink my herbal coffee. So I'm getting herbs that way. Um, I use a lot while I cook. I'd say parsley, oregano, rosemary, things like that. I use a lot of that when I'm cooking. And I drink a lot of kombucha. I make kombucha.
Mm.
So for my kombucha, I'll flavor it with like fruit and herbs. Like one of my favorites right now is lavender lemonade. So I just take
Ooh.
lavender from my garden and some lemons, and it's incredible. And so I'll do like hibiscus lemonade, or I'll do all different kinds. So I drink a lot of herbs and eat a lot of herbs. And I'd say that's probably what I use the most of on like a daily basis.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you are basically right now is growing the seeds and we'll get all the stuff in the garden eventually. But when it comes to the harvesting time for the herbs at the end of the season, now can you dry all of those herbs and then turn them into things later, or do you a lot of the things call for the fresh herbs?
Definitely cooking with fresh herbs is like a game changer. So that's a really easy one because you can go out to the garden whenever you want and
Mhm.
harvest the herbs. Most herbs like that. With most of the stuff I use, I'm usually drying them. Plus,
Okay.
I have a lot coming out of the garden, so I'm like preserving. Like, let's
Yeah.
just make room. But that's one thing that I love about herbs is they're so easy to preserve. Like it's even you don't need any fancy equipment. You just go out there and harvest it, and you can harvest it multiple times throughout the season. And then you can just hang it to dry, or I'll lay it down on like a rack and let it kind of dry. You can use a dehydrator. You can also just put the oven, like the light on in your oven,
Yeah.
and then you can stick it on a baking sheet and it'll dry within a few days.
Okay.
And so you're not like turning the oven on, you're just putting that light on. So there's so many different ways of doing it without
Mhm.
any fancy equipment, and it's so easy. So yeah, I mostly dry everything so I can get it, you know,
Yeah.
get everything moving. But I love using fresh herbs with cooking. So good.
That's awesome. You mentioned fire cider, and I saw you post about that on Instagram as well. Can you describe what that is? I mean, I basically at first look, I'm like, it's probably something you're supposed to drink up when you're sick, but is it good? Is it nasty? Tell me about it.
Depends on who you ask. I am not a vinegar person at all.
Okay.
And so like things that are vinegary or like even if I let my kombucha sit a little too long, I'm like, ooh, it has a little bit of a bite to it. But if you ask people like my mom and my best friend, they're like, this is so good. They can like just sip on it. But yeah, fire cider was from ancient times, and they started like I think it started with like a specific community out in the mountains, and it was always like wet and cold, and people would just constantly get sick, and so they would use things like onion and garlic are incredibly medicinal.
Mm,
And so they would use onion, garlic, they would use peppers, peppercorn, throw some herbs in there, all different kinds of things. And it's kind of a concoction, and you can throw citrus in there, for like the vitamins and all that stuff. I like to even throw cinnamon in mine, and I'll put cranberries,
mm,
for the GI health. And you basically put it all in a jar, and then you fill it with apple cider vinegar with the mother,
okay.
and you let that sit for like 6 to 8 weeks, kind of give it a shake every now and then. And then you're going to drain it, and then you'll put some like local raw. You really want raw honey. It doesn't have to be local, but that helps.
Mm,
And then you just have this incredible drink. I think it tastes disgusting, but a lot of people, like I said, they'll just sip on it, and it depends on what you put in it. It's very versatile. So people will have their own recipe that they love to use. And I'll do like a couple different recipes sometimes. And then when you start feeling a little sick, you're just gonna, take a shot of it, kind of like elderberry syrup.
mhm.
And if you are sick, you're gonna do several shots a day. And if you wanted to, you could take a shot every morning just for the boost of your immune system
Yeah.
and help with allergies and things like that. So fire cider is amazing. And I'm the kind of person who I'm like, I want to use every bit of the plant. So
Mhm.
I will now once I have it all, ready to strain, I'll strain it, I'll juice all the stuff, and then I will take what's left over, like the poultice and things like that.
Yeah.
I'll run it through my dehydrator, and then I'll
Okay.
blend it into like a powder, and I'll capsule it. So like people like
Oh.
my daughter refuses to drink fire cider. She will not touch it. And so I'll make the capsules for her. And so I'm like, you're gonna have to take more of these, but you can have the capsules as an alternative to the drink.
Yeah.
So it's a really wonderful thing. And it's fun to just play around with, try
Yeah.
stuff in a jar and, see what happens.
I would never have thought about saving it like that, dehydrating it and turning it into a capsule. That's so, so cool.
It's really fun because then you're like, I used every single bit of this
Right.
to waste, and I got an extra product out of it.
Exactly. Especially if you don't want to actually taste it. So what are your top choices for your herb garden?
Mine specifically, or for like beginners?
What about both?
Okay. For me, oh man, I don't know how to choose.
How big is it? Let's start there. How big is your herb garden?
Well, my herbs are all mixed in with my garden. My garden is like 2,000 square feet, so it's
Okay.
pretty large for one person to man. But I would say rosemary is one of my tops. Rosemary and sage, I just love
Mm,
them so much. I love holy basil. So it's holy Tulsi basil. It's a specific variety, and it's highly medicinal. It smells amazing, and it's
mm,
it's so delicious in like teas and stuff. And passion flower, calendula, um, chamomile, lavender. There's
mhm.
so many great ones. But like for a beginner gardener, I would say basil is a really good one to start with. There's a bit of pruning that you have to keep up with in the garden. So if you want something to just set and then not worry about, that's probably not the best one
Mhm.
because it'll go to seed pretty quickly. Um, but really great ones that are perennials in most zones, and they're kind of just plant them and harvest when you want would be rosemary, sage, oregano, parsley is a good one. It doesn't always overwinter, but I'd say that those are some good beginner herbs to kind of start learning with. And then
Okay.
they're easy to cook with them. You can make teas out of them. Lemon balm is another one if you
Mm,
really love teas and you're a tea drinker. So yeah, I'd probably start with those.
cool. Are there any herbs that don't play nice with each other? As in, like, you don't want to pair these two next to each other in the garden, or if you're making a tea, you wouldn't put those two together. I mean, there's probably some obvious ones as far as like things you would use for cooking necessarily to elevate your dish. You probably might not put in a tea, but just curious if there's anything that would, especially planting in the garden. If you plant this, it's not going to react well with that plant next to it.
Actually, have not found any herbs
Okay.
do well with each other. Um, Yeah, that's one thing. That's why they're so easy, especially if you like want to get started in gardening, but you don't know where to start, or you want to start slow and kind of ease your way into it. I would say start an herb garden because you can I mean, you can go to your local nursery, you can grab some starts and throw them in there and just start learning about them, start kind of harvesting them here and there and testing them out. But yeah, I don't think I know of any herbs that don't do well with each other. And yeah, and herbs are also great in the garden for as a companion plant. So
Yes.
they can help bring the good pests or the good bugs, and they can also repel some pests, some bad pests that you don't want. And so it's definitely great for the ecosystem of your garden too.
That's awesome. Is there anything that repels squirrels?
You know, I would say the only thing I could think of, and I'm not even sure if it would be garlic and onions.
Okay.
I think that would probably, like, garlic repels a lot of things and onions, but squirrels? I don't know.
I had some family members ask me, they're like, have you talked on your podcast and know anything about repelling squirrels? I'm like, not yet.
There are a couple, I have some tips for critters though. And so I don't know if you want me to tell them here or another
Sure.
podcast.
Go for it.
Yeah, so the most of the critters I have in my garden are birds and rabbits.
Okay.
Rabbits are always having nests throughout my garden.
Oh,
And then the birds will come pick out like the little seedlings for
oh,
the garden. And then I had a groundhog in there before, but I'm pretty good on critters,
okay.
like I'm in my little ecosystem where like the deer stay away and the squirrels kind of stay away, which is nice.
Oh, nice.
But I started with I don't know what they're called. It's like a picnic. It's like a shade thing that covers food when you're having a picnic. It's a mesh. I'm trying
Okay.
to what it's called. You can order them on Amazon in like a 20 pack. And
Hmm.
so I would order them and I would set them up over like a seedling, especially if you don't want things like roly-polies or any like bugs getting to it because the mesh
Yeah.
is finer. And you kind of staple it down with like landscaping staples. And so I really like that for seedlings and young plants. And then if it's mostly for squirrels and critters, if you go to the Dollar Tree, you can find these wire little trash cans, like office trash cans.
Oh,
It's really great to flip right over and put some two landscaping staples in, and they can't get to it, which is
yes.
wonderful. I do that in my garden all the time. And I've also found I'm not sure if it would work for squirrels, but it does kind of deter the rabbits and the birds. If you go to the Dollar Tree, you find the little like windmills.
Mm.
Those are great to have just throughout the garden because it'll kind of scare them away. And plastic forks, surprisingly, which you can also get at the Dollar Tree. But sticking a plastic fork up kind of around, like I had melons that the rabbits were getting
Oh,
to, and I was like, oh.
yeah.
I would stick the forks kind of like pointing out around that, and they stopped touching it.
Hey.
So those are a couple little tips for critters that, might
Yeah.
help for them. But I know squirrels are relentless. So
That's awesome. I don't think I would have thought about the forks at all, but all of those sound very efficient and price savvy.
exactly. And they've worked in my garden. So
That's
hopefully they
awesome.
work in others.
Now, where are you at in the
I'm in
country?
North Carolina
Okay.
and I am zone 8A,
Okay,
which is a warmer zone. I'm like central North Carolina. So,
gotcha.
yeah.
Awesome. So back to the herbs and the salves and things like that. What kinds of tools do you have on hand for processing the herbs and turning them into salves or ointments or, when you're storing even the dried teas, what kinds of, I guess, physical things do you have?
Yeah, that's actually the great thing with herbs is you don't need a whole lot. When you're preserving food, you definitely need, or it's convenient to have more things. But with herbs, you don't need a whole lot. You can dry them. You just air to dry them or stick them in the oven with the light on. And then I like to use a NutriBullet,
Okay.
like the little blender, and that helps really well with blending up the herbs and turning it into a powder. If it's something I want to turn into a powder, or you could use like a food processor, something like that, depending on what you're making.
Yeah.
Mason jars are great to have because I will not only store all of my herbs in mason jars, but I'll also, like when I'm making my salves and infusions and all that stuff, I'll use those. And also like a mason jar vacuum sealer is
Mm,
great. If you're going to be storing herbs, if you're going to be just kind of like using them throughout, you don't even have to worry about it. But if you want to store it for a while, a mason jar vacuum sealer, and they have them super cheap now. So you really don't need a whole lot.
okay. Now
Yeah.
the salve, what kind of stuff goes into like to make it like creamy and
Yeah. So I love making salve. So I grow a ton of calendula in my garden.
mm,
It's one of my favorite medicinal flowers to grow. And so when you're making salves, you always want to use dry herbs. And a lot
okay.
of things you use dry herbs because you don't want that moisture, bringing bacteria and also like helping something to go bad. So I'll dry the calendula and I'll do lavender and rosemary in it too because it
Mm,
has very healing properties. And I'll put it in a mason jar and I'll throw some oil in it. You can use like I like to use for skin, I like to use organic grapeseed oil, but you can do olive oil. And you're basically going to let that sit in a dark place for several weeks,
mm,
like shaking every now and then. And then you're going to strain it after a few weeks and you'll take that oil and melt, like you'll put it it's called a double broiler, but
yeah.
yeah, you could do like a pot with like a bowl over top with some water in the pot, and you're gonna melt beeswax.
Mm,
Put that in with the oil, and you can add some essential oils when it cools a little bit. You can even whip it to kind of make it like whipped salve.
oh,
Once it kind of stiffens up a bit, pour that into your jars, and you're good to go.
that's
So
awesome.
it's fun, it's easy. You don't need a whole lot of herbs, like you don't need all different kinds. So yeah, I really like making salve.
That's awesome. Now, to conclude with the biggest and best question of all, um, as you've learned about herbs and all of the just wonderful properties that they hold for cooking and for healing as well, what has this taught you about God?
So many things. I've definitely gotten closer in my relationship. I've gotten to know God better while working with herbs and
Mm,
gardening. And I learned that like he created everything and he gave us everything we need to be healthy, to sustain our body, to steward it well. And so learning about the herbs and using the herbs, like I'm continuously learning about more and more things that we can use that's just grown right in the earth. I'm like,
yeah,
he's literally handed us everything we need, and it's just up to us to just take care of it and steward it well. And so I also feel like when I'm in my garden and I'm stewarding that well and like I'm praying over the things that it'll help people and it'll nourish my family's bodies and things like that. And I'm worshiping,
mm,
like I definitely believe that gardening is a form of worship. And so it's definitely showed me his grace and his love and his goodness and faithfulness. So I've it's been great for my relationship with him.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. It is so true. I just think about, I mean, I'm right now I have an apartment, so I don't have the full on garden. I look forward to that someday, Lord willing. But to just, yeah, stand out there and to just even just breathe and appreciate the nature that he created is such a blessing. So I love that's something that you get to experience every day or while the sun is shining.
Yeah, I mean, I remember last spring, not everything is like, it's starting in my garden. Things are starting,
Yeah.
but last spring, I remember just going out and my medicinal flowers and herbs were the first thing to really take off and
Mm.
bloom. And I was going out there and I was harvesting a basket full of herbs and medicinal flowers every morning while drinking my coffee. And I just remember being in tears some days, like with
Oh,
gratitude, because it's like, this is what I've dreamed of. And this is such a blessing. And now I'm like harvesting this and it could go to nourish people, to nourish their families and to help them with whatever it may be, ailments and stuff. So that was incredible. Every day I was blown away. I was just like, this is amazing. So yeah, it's definitely incredible
oh.
to go do that. And you can always, do you have like a balcony at
I
your
do, yes. So I am growing right now some chamomile, some lavender, green onion. We have some tomato seeds planted, basil as well. So we've got those seeds started. So it is fun to get to stand out there and pluck basil leaves off the plant. So
And
little
so
little taste of it yet.
yes. Well, and it's so satisfying. Like, you can grab starts from your nursery or local gardeners. But when you like actually have a seed packet and you start a seed and you maintain it and
Yes.
transplant it, and then you just maintain it and you harvest it and you dry it and preserve it, and then you get to use it in a creation. Like when I make my calendula salve and I like gift it to someone
Yeah.
who is struggling with some type of ailment, I'm like, I literally started these from seed and like harvested them, and it was
Yeah.
such a blessing, and I prayed over them and I worshiped with them, and like, and it's amazing because I'm like, I made this, like that is
Yeah.
thing, it's like, this is great.
Yeah, it does. I'm like, in this little mirror, like how God can take a little tiny thing and then make it into this amazing plant that I get to enjoy as food. Because I haven't done any salves and things yet, but basically pesto is what I did last year. But like, how cool is this? So totally relate.
Exactly. And I don't understand how anyone can ever, I mean, I understand people have different perspectives, but I could never question his creation because I'm like, we can't do this on our own. Like,
No.
we could never design this and take a seed and make this, like medicine and food. But he can do it. Like,
Yeah.
it's incredible. And I keep learning about the different things I can do with herbs, which is so fun because I'm like, look what you did.
Yeah.
That's awesome, God.
That's so cool. I love it. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Sam, for joining me today. And if you want to follow Sam and all of the herbal journey and herbalism things, you can again go to our Instagram account, which is Grow in Grace Garden. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Home and the Maker podcast. And for other podcasts from Shine.fm, visit the Shine.fm podcast channel.